Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the COVID-19 Disruption Update Questions and Answers Forum. We're really excited to have you here today. This is a new concept. We're really hoping that this will be helpful for everybody that's attending. Many things are changing and happening on a daily basis, and so keeping up with it all is certainly a challenge. Now, once again, I'm just sharing our update for this recording that our date is 4/1 or April 1st, 2020, just in case things have changed yet once again. So speaking of recording, we are recording this webinar, and so if you do not want to participate in a recorded session, please exit the monitor or the recording at this time. I'd also like to take one more moment and share that we are not attorneys or tax accountants. And as such, none of the information we are sharing should be construed as legal or financial advice. We're always encouraging businesses to consult those partners and guidance for their own organizations. So on the phone from our team today, we have myself, Amanda Erickson, and Jeannie Valier from HRX Services. Jeannie, would you like to take a quick moment and say hello to the group?
Good morning. I guess no, good afternoon. I am Jeannie Valier. I'm with HRX Services. I am about 25 years into my HR career, so do feel bad for me. I've been doing this for quite a long time. I currently hold certifications in PHR, SHRM SCP, and I'm also certified in safe data operations and workplace investigations.
Awesome, thank you. And again, I'm Amanda Erickson, so I hold an SPHR and SHRM SCP as designations, and I have been in a specialty role in HR for about at least over 15 years, closer to 18 at this point. And we are just really excited to be able to share with you our thinking around some of these dynamics and things that are changing on a day-to-day basis. Now, we are also joined today by our colleague and friend, Mike Kohler, working through Elevate Virtual. Mike, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
I would, and a lot of the people who are in the room already and will be joining us are familiar to me. For those who aren't, I'm Mike Kohler. I'm the Elevate Training Coordinator, a program of the Larimer County Economic and Workforce Development Department. And just on the fly with partners like Amanda and Jeannie, we've been able to convert what is normally an in-person training workshop program in 3 curriculum tracks and convert it to Elevate Virtual with this public service initiative, providing free webinars throughout April, including these sessions twice a week. And we're looking already at extending it past the end of April. So thank you for joining us today. It's great to have the connectivity with like-minded professionals. So we appreciate that very much. And be on the lookout for more information with us in the days ahead.
Thank you. Great. And once again, Mike, thanks for giving us the opportunity to connect. So in our session today, we'll be working through facilitation of this program just a little differently. We're including some stock questions, things that we actually received from our session on Tuesday of this week. So if you were able to participate in our meeting earlier this week, thank you. We're glad to see you here again. And if you're not able to participate, the recorded webinar is found on our YouTube channel, HR Explained. Now, one thing that I can say is I can already see Rhonda is on top of things, and the date today is the 2nd of April. That is true. But let me make a clarification. The slides are up to date as of April 1st. So anything that we knew as of yesterday is kind of where our data is in. But thank you once again. Okay, so let's do a little housekeeping. Our tools box. So you may see this, it might be hidden below at the bottom of your screen. You'll need to hover your mouse toward the bottom of the screen just to make sure that you can see that come up. It should see a raise hand function. So let's test it out. Let's see who found the tools box and how many of you joined us on Tuesday of this week for our first session. Go ahead and raise your hand. All right, outstanding. So we got just about half. So that's good to know and appreciate that. And also, I think that even if you weren't able to be on that session, we're going to cover some of those pieces. I would like to take a moment and let you know that next Tuesday we'll be doing another session. There has been some updates even since yesterday to some of the questions and answers, some more details involved, and we should see that kind of progressing through the rest of this week. So if you haven't signed up for next Tuesday's session, we're going to review that in more detail at that time. Now, there's also a chatbot feature, and you should be able to see that, which is similar to any other chat feature that you would see in another system. The team and I will do our best to moderate this area, but I want to direct you instead to the question and answers box. So using the question and answers box will allow us to engage there a little easier. And what's most important is that it allows us to pull a report with these questions so that we can address them after the session has ended. And again, that's where we took some of the content for today. I also want to take a moment and do a short plug that for the next 4 weeks, like I said, we have that Tuesday content-based session followed by the Thursday forum session like today, where we can instead provide more communication and information around specific questions that you have. So without further delay, let's begin. So our first question, again, coming from our Tuesday session, we had shared some thoughts around some tools and structure ideas that companies could use for helping their employees telework and doing this remote work concept, and really just be able to help people collaborate better. And so I'm going to share that screen just so that you can see what it was in case you weren't a part of that session. And you can see some of the different structure and tools that we had suggested. In that question, then we had, so I'm going to go back to the question just to make sure. Are there any examples for apps and tools for training and development? Because we didn't really include that. So I'm going to answer this right now and say, so I think this is a tough question, honestly, and it truly depends on the industry you're in, what it is that you're trying to train. You know, if it is just how do I host a webinar, how do I participate in a webinar, how do I go to meetings, you know, those are usually offered in the tools that you're using. There's some type of demo or training module, and YouTube is a great source for some of those things. But if you're also trying to talk about how do I do virtual training in my own session, you know, what does that look like? There are certainly learning management systems out there that could be helpful for your particular industry. And that can help with tracking progress, development, along with the training pieces as well. Now, if you have a trainer and they just need some virtual tools like polling software, I'm going to suggest one that I know that I use in a couple different places. So Mentimeter is one that I've used, and Poll Anywhere is also another tool that I've used, which allows you to do that text function with your phone so that you can make sure that people are staying engaged in your training. And I think overall, though, it really depends. And I'd recommend working with a partner to kind of develop what type of training you're looking for. Now, from an HR perspective, I would say that SHRM has some manager-based training that's coming out that's designed to help people in management positions. And there's also, of course, HR-based training sessions that I think are pretty good. And if you have any certifications or designations that you want to keep, they have a lot of offerings there, especially virtually, to make sure that you can keep up with that. And one other resource that I'm going to throw out is the Association for Talent Development, or ATD. I think they also have a lot of great information that could be helpful when you're trying to work through this as well. Jeannie, anything to add?
Well, first of all, we have somebody who chatted to us. They recommend Loom. Which
great.
is a screen share video service for quick virtual training on the task. Yeah, I actually have a couple of ideas. Sometimes, you know, we have a couple of clients that we work with who are looking for like leadership training or management training, but they don't have a lot of dollars to, you know, go out and buy that training. There are some great free resources out there. They may be limited in scope, but they're free. There's a website called Coursera. It's an online platform that has a whole plethora of different types of classes. Now, they won't, you know, give you the learning management system and the trackability, but you know, you can have people take screenshots of completion and things like that. Another great website that I like is allison.com. They do a lot of online supervisor training.
That's awesome. Mike, anything to add from your end, if you'd like to? I know you're involved in a lot of training. Oh, and I'd like to take a moment to also plug Elevate Virtual. That would be a great training source.
Okay, you stole my thunder to the punch, but I was going to give an unabashed plug for Elevate Virtual because, again, the free workshops will continue through April, but even under normal circumstances, the accessibility of our training program from top flight consultants like Amanda and Jeannie and many other faculty members on Elevate are available in a variety of ways throughout the year. But you're welcome to enjoy Elevate Virtual for as long as we keep doing it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
I guess we should also do our own shameless plug. HRX Services also offers training.
We do. And one thing I am going to, again, just encourage people, and Juliana, thank you once again for sharing some information with us here. If you wouldn't mind putting your questions and answers and different things, even if it isn't quite a question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A because we can capture that data, and we do want to try to be as interactive as possible so that way we can share this information back out to everybody on the call. So once we're finished, we will capture all of that and then send that back out. So one other thing I do want to take a moment and also address is that the question and answer box is there. So as we're going through this, if you do have questions, please go ahead and submit them because like I said, we have some standard stock questions that we know are here, but we want to offer an opportunity to answer anything that people have as well that are still lingering. Okay, so let's move to the next question that we had. Do you know whether employees are required to pay out vacation time before an employee can apply for unemployment? We don't require employees to take vacation, but I'm unsure if we must pay them out according to Colorado wage and hour requirements. We are not terminating any employees, but we don't have hours for them. So I'm going to go ahead and start, but then I want Jeannie to come in on the back end there. So I'd say I think that the difference between a furlough and being laid off. So furloughs, generally speaking, my experience has usually been that furloughs happens in mainly like government and public-based positions, but we're not seeing that at this point, right? Because this is kind of unprecedented times. And I'm going to take a minute and acknowledge that I know that we've had a nice economy for a while, so this is a little bit unfamiliar territory to a lot of us. But from my understanding, furloughs are, you're reducing hours or you have no hours, but essentially the employee is still an employee. So, you have some similar benefits. They're still employed with you. So therefore they can still apply for unemployment because of the reduction of hours capacity, but you don't necessarily have to pay out that vacation time. A layoff, on the other hand, I think is terminating the employment relationship. Like we are exiting our relationship together as employee-employer, even if it is job attached for a period of time. And for that reason, you would need to pay out as you would any standard termination, even if it was job attached. At least that's what I think is the case. Jeannie, thoughts?
I would agree. Additionally, I would say you're reducing hours depending on how long, what that variable looks like. I would still refer to your plan documents. At the end of the day, your plan documents will always govern everything. And also work with your benefit broker and, just to verify and double check before you make these big decisions.
Agree. I think that that's the key piece right now is that we're getting a lot of questions about, financial situations and benefits. And we're proud of the relationships that we have. We value our partners in those spaces. And so I would definitely say they are the subject matter experts when it comes to these types of things. There's a lot of moving pieces. So just make sure that you're reaching out to all of the people that could potentially be helpful to you when you're trying to figure this out. So I want to take one moment and run over to our question and answer box and just say, first, thank you very much. Someone said that we look great. So thank you. My question is the different types of communication that we listed, Zoom, instant messaging, Google Hangouts. So are all of these free? And so I'm going to go ahead and go back to that slide. And I'm going to say that when we're really looking at it, and I'm going to pull up my spotlight so I can make this a little easier. Okay, so when we're looking at it, Zoom, for example, they will allow you to have, I think, one-on-one conversations. So you can sign up for free on their platform and have one-on-one conversations. I think once you get more than 1 or 3, something like that, then you get cut off at like 40 minutes. So I think like 1 to 3 people, you can only have a session for 40 minutes. So if that was something that you were looking for, you could certainly do something like that. But generally speaking, I think the biggest reason that Zoom has a ton of activity around it right now is because a lot of people jump there. It's a pretty affordable option. Obviously, that's what we're using here today. But there are different functionalities in it. So you can usually set up, I think, for one person on the platform we're at like $15 a month, something like that. And that will allow you up to 100 participants. Now, it's not in the webinar function like we're in today, but that's more of a meeting facilitation piece. Now, as far as GoToMeeting and I think WebEx is another big one. I know Adobe has one, and I've seen some other interesting training software and virtual experience type models out there. I'm not sure if they have free versions, but I do know that generally speaking, because we've done a lot of comparisons on it recently, that they're very similar in pricing for the most part. People are trying to be really competitive to allow people to come into this space. So just something to think about. And then Slack. So Slack is a tool that you can use as a collaboration tool. I'm just going to quickly do a quick little show of hands. How many people have used Slack before? Okay, so just a few of us. So Slack is an interesting communication tool. It's more for like collaboration. We use it actually as an organization, and we have a client that uses it pretty heavily because they have a lot of, their industry doesn't have a lot of email component to it. So this is a way for them to communicate easily on their mobile devices. So Slack is one of those kind of collaboration tools where you can have chats and you can share things with different people. It's kind of set up as a channel. It's pretty neat. Basecamp is one that I know that we use for the Co-SHRM State Council, and I will say that we're pretty happy with that so far. It's been a really great tool, but Slack does have a free option. Basecamp, as far as I know, does not. If somebody knows better, please feel free to share and we'll correct that. But we do pay for that platform there. Google Hangouts, some of those things, I think, again, your capabilities for Google Hangouts or Google Chat is dependent on whether or not you use Google, really to get the best functionality. So if your team uses Google, then Google Chats will be a great resource. If your team uses like Outlook, I think that Jeannie said Jabber is a good resource for that. Cisco, thank you. And then I think that Microsoft has Microsoft Teams, something in that space. So I think some of those things. As far as the task management piece, Trello and Asana, again, there are free versions of that, absolutely, to just get set out. If you're doing project management work, those are great tools for that type of purpose. And they do also have, so it's limited functionality when you get that free version. And Toggle is a time clock system. We use it here at HRX. Again, there's a free component and then a paid component if you're interested in those things. So I think a lot of these resources are available somewhat on a free basis, but you just have some limitations. Okay, so I think we have another question here. Excuse me. So regarding furlough versus layoff with reduced hours, an employee would still need to work 30+ hours in a week in order to be eligible for benefits, right? Jeannie, do you want to tackle that?
Well, I think we kind of talked a little bit about this just a few moments ago. So again, plan documents is where I would start first. the guidance that we have been receiving is the furlough it can be as little as no hours, and that they could still be eligible for their benefits. I think also some of that's predicated on whether you're a fully insured plan versus a self-insured plan or partially self-funded. These are definitely things, plus you want to keep in the ACA component down the road in terms of not just necessarily 30 hours per week, but 130 hours per month. Are you proud of me, Amanda?
I am. That was awesome. Thank you.
If anybody knows me, I do not like ACA. But anyway, I think these are things that you should be definitely consulting your benefit advisor or your broker.
Yes, just to be sure. Some plan documents will allow an active at work employee is kind of what we're talking about. So you have to be actively at work for potentially 24 hours. But again, we've seen some carriers do different things right now just because it is unprecedented times. So Jeannie's advice, going back to your broker would be one of the best pieces. Additionally, I want to share this screen just to further illustrate the last question. So you can kind of understand a little bit more about where these things are coming from. This was taken from Gusto, which is just a payroll provider. Yep. For usually smaller companies, but they have some nice guidance sometimes. So we wanted to talk about that. So you have, which ones still generally would be considered, whether you're doing a furlough versus a layoff. And so pay, generally, that's going to be impacted. And so I think, the X's mean that not necessarily you're not paying them, but final paycheck, generally not, but it depends on your state law. And as far as a layoff, then that's really kind of that big difference, right? Is that you're terminating that relationship when you're laying somebody off. And in that course of doing that, that final paycheck needs to be issued. And then again, with some of the health insurance pieces, so whether or not COBRA applies would be applicable here. We once more want to just share, definitely talk with your brokers because there are some different things that are happening with that related to the new legislation as well. Okay, so moving along.
We had some folks follow up and say Basecamp has a 30-day trial, but is otherwise $99 a month.
Okay, great. And also confirm that Zoom, Slack, Google Hangouts definitely have free versions. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's talk about our next question. So for, and we go back and forth, is it expanded emergency, but the legislation calls it expanded FMLA. So for expanded FMLA, does HR have required paperwork to get to employees similar to FMLA? So I'm going to jump in just a little bit, and then Jeannie, if maybe you want to kind of talk a little bit about the questions and answers. Okay, so expanded FMLA is a little different than FMLA. Generally, some type of certification or documentation would be recommended. However, the question and answers does say that a certification may not be necessary to prove that they have COVID. So normally, if you're in an FMLA-based position, you have your standard, I've got 5 days, 15 days, 5 days. I've got this timeline that I have to get some information from a provider regarding certifying this person's need for leave is as truly a medical necessity. So when we're talking about that, there's obviously some concerns with being able to do that with COVID, just because, we're stay-at-home orders, lack of testing, a lot of different components there. So we have seen that they're saying that certification may not be necessary to prove that they have COVID, rather that there's a more adaptive approach to provide certification for COVID. And the law states actually that they're just seeking a medical diagnosis. Now, I know that recently we've seen, as of late last night, there's been some changes to exactly what is required and the different documents. And so once again, I'm hopeful we'll be able to bring that more to full light next week on Tuesday. But certainly just know that if you're not familiar with the question and answer section on the DOL site regarding some of these things, that would be incredibly helpful. And Jeannie, I don't know if you have that available. Do you want to provide any further information around it?
I do. It's actually question number 16 on the Department of Labor's website in terms of what documentation is required. And they pretty much, they've outlined an additional guidance as of last night, as Amanda said. What does that additional documentation look like for the paid sick leave? They don't have any designated form. I know we've had a couple of people ask, do they have a specific form for the paid sick leave or even the expanded FMLA? They do not, but they have given guidance as to what that form should look like. You as the employer who's creating it, some of the things and criteria you need to ask. We've actually updated our forms to be in compliance with what they're looking for. But one thing to note is they did say if you're taking the expanded FMLA, that you still need to do the certification process, provide the medical certification, just like you would under FMLA. So that's going to be a little challenging, especially seeing doctors. Well, how will they be able to fill out that paperwork? What does that look like? There's going to be a level of leniency that I think employers have got to have that give and take with employees because they can't get into the doctor. They can't get that paperwork. Will a doctor's note suffice in the interim? Just that. I think at the end, you need to collaborate and work closely with your employee. And just remember, the DOL has always been very clear on FMLA and pretty much all employment laws. It should be to the benefit or the betterment of the employee.
Agree. I think you'll experience favorable results more so if you kind of lean that way than the opposite way. Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, so let's look at, so I think you touched on this a little bit, Jeannie, but is there a form that we should be using for an employee to request the emergency paid sick leave or the emergency FMLA?
Again, not a designated form by the DOL. They've given guidance of whatever form you as the employer create, however you brand it, whatever other additional items you might need, but they have specified it's like 3 or 4 points in particular. There's kind of a little mini attestation that the employee is going to have to affirm, especially around the fact that they may not have been able to see a medical care provider, it's telehealth or things like that. So again, that's a form that we have created. Any employer can do that. They've given you the direction on how to make that form. Absolutely.
And at the end of our session, we always try to leave you with something that you could take away. And so we've got a list of links in different areas that you can go where some of this is in there. But if you have any questions or you want to follow up with us afterwards, please feel free to do so. We're happy to expand on your particular situation. Okay, so again, I think most importantly, just to hone in on this, is that having some type of documentation, and I'm going to just kind of circle back just a little bit, because initially when this came out, when Families First Coronavirus Response Act was introduced, there was this general thinking that, okay, this is going to really help us, and for people who can't be at work because of childcare reasons, or can't be at work because they're self-isolating for a variety of reasons, or they're taking care of someone who is, that we're going to have a kind of a layer of protection with this type of law. And so at first we thought, okay, well, this is going to catch all of these people in the middle here. And then at the end of last week, we got some clarification in the form of the questions and answers that really talked about, what really qualified as COVID-19 related leave. And basically, essentially, it says that if you're working, as long as you're working normal hours, so meaning you're able to work, your normal 40 hours a week, that this would apply to you. So if for some reason you've had a business slowdown, even for the reason of a state mandate or a state order to stay at home, that doesn't necessarily qualify you to be able to be taking this type of leave. And so we went from this kind of to very narrow focus. So I think that what you really need to take away from this, outside of what your employees are doing in order to substantiate their leave, is that your documentation needs to be really clear from your end. And I think that it did say, and forgive me, Jeannie, if you did mention this, that you need to keep it for 4 years. Is that the timeline?
Is correct. Yep.
In order to make sure that you're substantiating that the leave that you were paying for, or the tax credits you were getting in order to pay for that leave, was substantiated by a COVID-related leave purpose. So just something to kind of think about.
And that information's not on the DOL site. It's actually on the IRS site. And I think the reason for the 4 years is that's tied to the payroll piece.
I agree. Okay, so let's move to our next question, because I do think that we have, and somebody has asked about sending that link. So I'm trying to find that on the website now. We definitely will. We'll have a bunch of links that we'll make sure we send out with the rest of this. If there is a specific link, maybe you could just, and again, please just type back in and let us know exactly which link you're looking for, and we'll make sure you can get that information. We do have another question. It says, if our small business would be jeopardized as a going concern, how do we take advantage of the small business exemption? Also, if we pay the emergency paid sick leave, are we opening ourselves up to being responsible for paying the expanded family and medical leave? And I'm going to go ahead and advance our slide, because what good timing, I will tell you. So we had the same thing, which is great. So this is what essentially we're talking about. But let's first address the question that was asked, and then we'll come back to the poster question. How does that sound, Jeannie?
Great. And I can, by the way, I'm on that question on the DOL, so I can copy and paste it when you're done talking about it in the typed answer section so they can see it.
Perfect. That would be great. I will go ahead and let you know. Okay, so if you are under 50 employees, generally they're saying that the rule is for everyone's learning purposes on the phone. So the rule is saying that if you have 500 employees or less, that this would be something that would impact your business, meaning that expanded FMLA and the emergency paid sick leave, along with the other provisions of the FFCRA, or Families First Coronavirus Response Act, would apply to you. However, if you are under 50 employees, they are saying that there is a small business exemption. And I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide, just because I'm going to pull up what that looks like. So the small business exemption information, again, available on the question and answer section, is basically saying, okay, if you want to qualify for the small business exemption, meaning I can't adhere to this because this will basically, destroy our business. This is a business breaker, essentially, is really the level that they're looking at. So they've given us, and let's see if I've got my little spotlight here still. They've given us this information as far as like what those reasons would be. So there are 3 different kind of reasons that they're really saying you can elect from. And then how to qualify would be, let me take that right back. Okay. That they say the leave is requested. So here are the steps that you would have to walk through. So the leave is requested because the child's school or place of care is closed, or the child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 related reasons. Now, the employer also has to have fewer than 50 employees, and an authorized officer of the business has determined that at least one of these 3 conditions, this is question 58 that it's referencing, is satisfied. So again, this was copied and pasted. Jeannie is also copying and pasting it into the chat box so that you can copy it now if you'd like to, but this will be on the slides that we'll send out afterward. So there is that exemption. Now, I will let you know that on all of the webinars and sessions that I have been a part of, that generally they're basically saying, I mean, this really has to be like a business breaker. So if it's just, this would be frustrating, or this would be hard, or I'd have to lay some people off, that may not qualify. I just want to say that really the intention is to try to keep people, and that's why they're giving some of these other pieces. So the FFCRA, as well as the CARES Act, that's now available as well. And so, for example, in our own client situation, we've got a client that is in the beauty industry, and they have, they're a large organization in the beauty industry, and they've got a lot of locations. And unfortunately, like almost every single one of their people, it has to be laid off because they are not allowed to do business at all for any reason. And so this would be something that I would consider and look at and say that that's probably more of a qualifying aspect than perhaps like an engineering firm that has, under 50 employees, but business is slow. So I think that you should kind of look at that and maybe really assess with, your accountant or financial advisors to really see if this is something that could be applicable to you. Now, one of the reasons that I kept this on is because I've heard this question a few times. And that is, what if you are a small business under 50 and are planning to file for an exemption? So you are planning to go ahead and take advantage of that exemption there. Do we still have to hang up the poster? And so, Jeannie, would you like to explain at least just really quickly about the poster, since we have an opportunity to share around that?
Meaning, I'm not
the
sure.
FFs. Would you like to talk about the qualifications or what's required for the FFCRA poster requirements? Just since we're touching on that.
Meaning the hanging of it, or?
Yeah, just that it exists, some of those things, yeah.
Yep, it exists. And I'll actually tie this to, somebody asked a question. We are a healthcare provider, therefore we are choosing to be exempt from this act. Do we still have to hang the poster? Yes, you do. But can I tell you, because we just spoke to one of our clients this morning who is also a healthcare provider, and they asked the same exact question. I would also encourage you, because employees, they're not going out to the DOL's website. They're not looking at these FAQs. They are not as versed as we are. You may, I don't think there's anything wrong with printing out the excerpt, because they have clearly defined what a healthcare provider is. So, if you believe you fall under this exemption, you may want to print that out so that they can have that as a point of reference, so they understand, oh, I see the poster. I know that that's available had I not fell into this exemption. Transparency is a wonderful thing. I don't think you shouldn't put that information out there. The poster, they have it both in English and in Spanish. It's a one-page poster. Most of your staff, or a lot of companies are finding most of their staff's working remotely. So I think you got to deal with the complexity of how do you get that to them? Well, if first and foremost, it's like any other federal poster, you have to put it in a conspicuous place. So once you do that and you've satisfied that part, now what about all the people that aren't there to see it in its conspicuous place? Because typically you say, okay, well, here it is. Now you probably want to email it to them, or put it on your intranet, or if you have Slack or Basecamp or any of these tools where you can post a document, I would do that. I would encourage you to also email it and do a return receipt if you don't already have in place some kind of electronic disclosure agreement with the employee, allowing for you to send and receive information electronically from the employee. That's something very important to have when you're communicating with employees. Otherwise, you're not doing your part in ensuring that they're getting that and you're being compliant. So I would definitely email the poster. If you haven't done so, I would do so right away. It's going to be in one of the links that we send out, and do a return receipt so you make sure that everybody gets it.
I would agree with that. Now, one thing that I will do, and certainly, as you can see, even with Jeannie and I, there are those pieces where we're uncertain. So I want to play on the other side of what she's saying in that space, and just for a moment, let you know. So it's saying, this particular question is saying, now, do I have to post that poster if I'm a small employer and planning to, have the exemption here, which, by the way, they're saying, yes, you need to document this. Yes, you need to be aware of why you don't want to be considered or why you're being exempt, but they're also saying, don't send that to us. We don't want that information. So there is some guidance on again, that questions and answers document that I think is very important as we're diving through all this. That said, I do want to take a moment and say, again, we're not attorneys, we're not financial advisors in that space and tax consultants. So I want to let you know, I have been on webinars that I've heard other people say, no, you don't need to post this. If you're exempt, you don't need to post this. If you're going to do the exemption, then that's not important. I will say that we generally err on the side of caution most of the time in our practice, but and we think that the posting the requirement is probably important. But the law says if you're a covered employer, really trying to dive into what does covered employer mean. I'm not really sure. It says that it's 500 employees or less. But if you're exempt from that, does that mean you're a covered employer? So I think that there's an argument that if you're seeking that exemption and you don't want to confuse your employees and provide them information about something that you're not able to do, again, the only thing that we know is the law states that all covered employers must post the U.S. Department of Labor's DOL FFCRA notice in a conspicuous place on its premises. I'm sure you can make that argument. So I would say at this point between Jeannie and I, kind of just sharing both sides of that, really the idea would be consult with legal guidance before not posting it, just to be sure, because I think you could make that argument either way. And I just want to be totally transparent. But I would say on our end, we can't find anything that substantiates, yes, you do, no, you don't, if you're in one of those exemption classes.
I would definitely agree, Amanda. Absolutely. Yep. And I also, if you do post it and you are exempt, technically no harm, no foul because you're exempt.
Yeah, I agree. So going forward, let's talk about this. Has the act or virus changed anything with Colorado WARN requirements? So this is an interesting piece. And so generally speaking, I'm going to just kind of quickly talk about WARN in particular and walk through a few things. And then, of course, Jeannie, jump in. But I think that first, WARN is triggered when a covered employer, so they close a facility or discontinues operating unit affecting at least 50 employees. And you usually have to have 100 employees or more. There are also other significant factors if you're laying off 500 or more workers at a single site of employment within 30 days. So there are some specific numbers that you really need to align with as far as WARN is concerned. Now, Jeannie, I'm going to ask you your thought about this, just because in my like looking at this and how does WARN impact when you really don't have a lot of notice or ability to do something and really provide that notice. So I would say that there's also this exception to the 60-day notice where it says there are 3 exceptions. And I'm just like looking at it right now, just to kind of say one of those exceptions would be unforeseeable business circumstances. So when the closing or mass layoff is caused by business circumstances that were not reasonably foreseeable at the time of that 60-day notice would be required. And again, it had to be some business circumstance that's caused by sudden, dramatic, unexpected action or conditions outside the employer's control. Like the unexpected cancellation of a major order or something like this, or mass business being reduced because of a stay-at-home order, I think I could include in that. So I would say that there is an argument for also saying that potentially that wouldn't occur. Some states have flat out said we're taking away the requirements for that altogether. Jeannie, what are your thoughts?
I would absolutely agree. And to add to that, Colorado is inundated right now with folks who are laying off people. The only thing that where the original applications had to be either in person or mail, they're now accepting them via email.
Correct. And I don't know if the notification process is still there. So I would say, from the WARN implications and the fact that if you're an organization with 100 or more employees that are really looking at reducing your workforce by 50 people or more, speaking with legal counsel, this can also have some impact as to whether you decide to lay people off or just furlough, or what does that really look like in order to help with some of that language. But we're really getting into some of those implications that are really, this is when your attorneys are necessary, and really trying to make sure that your strategy, whatever it may be, is quote unquote reviewed by your legal counsel to make sure that you're applying by all laws considered. So again, these are just our thoughts, kind of reading what we see out there. But this is, these are big issues. So we totally get that. So that said, really, those are the questions and answers that we had. We really wanted to make sure that we were helpful as long as we could be, and provide answers to what was going on, and making sure that we address any questions that came in here. So I want to just give it a few more minutes in case anybody else wants to ask any other questions. Mike, if you want to say anything right now, and in case we don't have any other questions come in, really we want to give you some time back if you need it. The goal here was just to be helpful and provide a forum for you to be able to engage. Once again, we'll be doing this then next week on Thursday. Next week, we're going to be talking a little bit more on Tuesday, kind of around leave and what does that look like, and how do I have to really apply this, and of course, any updates to the COVID-19 and regulations we're seeing. And we'll have a guest visitor, Kate from Tilt will be our visitor presenter with me in this panel discussion. And Tilt is a leave platform that is quite an amazing tool. So I would just say that that's kind of what's coming up. Mike?
I just wanted to add something regarding the discussion of Zoom. And if you're not familiar with it but would like to try it out, the free service is incredibly good. And it's useful. The Workforce Center side of the department I work in, with dozens and dozens of job seeker clients, they have converted to Zoom for all their one-to-one contacts, or at least all the people who do have computer access. For those who don't, they're setting them up at computer stations and interacting with them that way. So there's unlimited one-to-one or one-to-small group. Like, let's say you have a remote set of employees who are socially distanced, but they're considered essential, that their login as a group only counts as one, and you can have up to a group of 3 at no charge. So it's a pretty good way to get acquainted with Zoom, and then maybe eventually convert to the whopping $15 a month pro level, which working for a government agency, I'm so appreciative to you all, because suddenly I got approved to bump up to their account. So I'm in the club now.
Thank you, Mike.
Looks like we have a couple questions that came in, Amanda.
Okay. Go ahead, Jeannie.
So the first question is, if we have an employee who has seen a doctor via telemedicine, COVID-19 test was not ordered, the employee is experiencing COVID-19-like symptoms, doesn't feel well enough to work, does not feel well enough to work from home, but has the ability to do so, does this qualify for emergency paid sick leave? Amanda, do you want to answer, or you want me to?
I'll just tell you really quickly, I know that there's been some additional additions to those 6 qualifying reasons on the question and answer, just because I floated past there today at some point. But I would say initially my thinking is that it would, because they're experiencing COVID-related symptoms, that would qualify. Again, if their regular schedules are available for them to work, or telework. Jeannie, anything to add?
I would agree, and actually the DOL even says whether you've been advised by a healthcare provider or experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking medical diagnosis. So they don't even say that you have to actually be tested in order to qualify.
Okay. Thank you. And the last one I see, do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Here? Okay. So are there any preferred resources for employees that are uninsured, testing, documentation of illness, et cetera? That's a good question. Do you know, Jeannie?
Are there any preferred?
I think I know that there's some telehealth resources out there that are available. I'm not certain if there are like some standalone systems without a broker. I know that there are if you're working with one. Like I believe that telehealth has one, teledoc, but I'm not sure.
So I know off the top of my head, this is just off the top of my head, MD Live, I believe you can utilize their services even without insurance, I think. Again, preface, I think, and you just pay for the services as is over you set up a credit card payment or something like that.
Okay. And I'm just answering with another question that we had is that there is a DOL website on the FFCRA, but not a good document to include or a link that states the exemption for healthcare providers. So we will go ahead and provide that link in our slide deck, and just sending that out as well so that everybody can see that. And just so that you know, this will be the slide deck that we will be providing, which does share some of that. And so here's the FFCRA website. And then, of course, the question and answers. So both of these links will be able to be helpful for that. But to your question, we'll just make sure that I will make sure when we send out the slides that you have that information as well.
Great. And we had one other question, but I think it's kind of similar to the other one. So if they're seeking medical diagnosis but don't get one, are they still eligible? Yes. Yes, they are.
That is our understanding at this point, correct?
Yeah. And this is as of yesterday.
Well, and some things to understand too is that, you know, if you're an FMLA based employer, some of these things are very different. Again, with FMLA, it is very on the employer to make sure that they're letting employees know when they qualify for FMLA. And in this circumstance, it's a little different. It's a little less granular. I'm going to say it's very broad. There's this idea of collaboration between the employee and the employer. So the idea is, well, what comes first, right? Does the employer recognize that this could be leave that's needed for expanded FMLA, or does the employee have to request that they're getting that leave? And totally honestly, we're not sure what the answer is there. To Jeannie's point earlier, I think that we would all argue that taking action that would most benefit your employee, obviously, for a lot of reasons, we would say is important. But from a compliance standpoint, certainly that would be favorable to the organization. So I would say kind of making sure that you connect with your team if you have those related questions would be important. But based on what we're hearing here, what we're seeing, I think we would both agree that yes, that would qualify. Okay, well, I am not seeing any other questions. Mike, once again, I would like to thank you for the ability to have the opportunity to work with in this space and be able to present our information. We'd like to thank all of you for being on the webinar today. Thank you. And we will send out the slides, so we will have that provided for you going forward. Please be sure to look at our other sessions, and maybe we'll see you next week. Thank you.